to not overlook the beautiful ordinary moments. They're just as important. They're not as dramatic, they don't get your attention, but they make up the majority of our life. So if we resist them, then we're kind of resisting our life, which is a shame because it's all beautiful. It's just different aspects of the same thing. Hello friends, John Dalton here, Further Emergence podcast, where we go into love, consciousness and the mystery. And in this episode we're going into surrendering to the flow of life, being reflections, growing into ourselves, the dogma of perfection, and amazing life. All right, let's have a look at some of the memes on the Further Emergence Instagram feed. First one, simple, says, whatever comes, let it come. Whatever stays, let it stay. And whatever goes, let it go. So, in case you can't hear, I'm standing in front of a biggish river, or a river in flow. And it's a good example of this whole idea of, the whole idea of going with the flow is popular and it sounds good, but sometimes it gets the idea of like you just sort of sit back and just let it all happen, which isn't what it's about, because then you just get blown around in your life. Like having a sense of what you're doing is very important, and without that is you just can kind of drift through your whole life. There's a book, I mentioned it before, by Napoleon Hill. It's something like An Interview with the Devil or something like that. And in it he talks about drifting quite a lot. So going with the flow, yeah, it's good, but it's not immediately obvious, because initially you can feel like you're having to go against the flow, particularly the flow of popular thinking, the flow of your conditioning, the flow of lots of things. So going against that cannot be easy, and it doesn't feel very, peaceful or tranquil or any of those kind of, like those nice kind of ideas that you have about going with the flow. And this meme really speaks to it, like whatever comes, let it come. So you have your kind of where you're heading, but then you're not resisting the flow, the big flow of the mystery as it sort of powers through and just does what it's doing. Because like you can see very clearly from this river, it's, it would be hard to stop it. It's not saying it's impossible, but really you can't stop it. All you can do is redirect it. So this idea of letting it, whatever comes, come, and then whatever stays, let it stay, that can be hard. Maybe what comes you don't like, and maybe you don't want it to stay. Or maybe you do want it to stay, and then you can't do the next bit, which is whatever goes, let it go. But you will find that a lot of unhappiness is in resistance to that, meaning we don't like what's coming, we don't like what's here, and we don't want to let go of the things that we love and are attached to. So if we surrender to that big flow, keep on purpose, don't drift, have a direction, but then also be responsive to what's happening, then our unhappiness diminishes a lot, because whatever comes, we let it come. Whatever stays, we let it stay. And whatever goes, we let it go. Now, you mightn't like what stays, you mightn't like what you have to let go of, you mightn't like what comes, but if you're surrendered to that process, then it will be easier, so much easier than trying to stand against a big river like this. All right, the next one, it's not really a meme, it's more of a poem. Well, I don't know, it's not even a poem. It's more of just something I wrote. So the picture is of this woman doing a sort of a cartoon flop with another person. I think it's Photoshopped. God, I hope it's Photoshopped. Anyway, so what I wrote is Estaman, Namaste backwards. And that's how it is sometimes. Instead of the Buddha in me sees the Buddha in you, it's the pain in me sees the pain in you. And it pulses with resentment and regret and righteous anger. the Buddha in me just smiles and waits without waiting for the storm to blow through, for the clouds to part and the light of compassion to warm my heart and to co-shine with you again. Namaste. So I think that came from a sort of a reaction to the way people were just sort of saying Namaste, you know, and like, what does it really mean, you know? And it's that, look, you know, I'm no expert on it, but roughly it means the Buddha in me sees the Buddha in you. And that's beautiful when that happens, but often it doesn't happen. Often what happens is, as I said, the pain in me resonates with the pain in you. So you're angry and I'm angry back. Or you're jealous and I'm like, well, I'm going to get you back. I'm going to be even more jealous than you are. Or you're a bit mean with me. You didn't when it came time for you to buy you a round of drinks, you didn't buy well, you know, I'm not going to buy you any more drinks. I'm going to, you know, and like that happens on so many levels where the pain in us responds to the pain in the other person. And then we come back, you know, the clouds part, the clouds of unconsciousness part, and then we're like, oh, why was I such a shit? But then, if you can kind of see that there's a part behind that. There's a part behind our unconsciousness. Like, for me, like what I observe in myself and in other people, we give ourselves such a hard time about our unconsciousness. And we think that we are our unconsciousness. And when you can kind of see that everybody is like a planet, you could say, and then we have weather patterns around us. So at the center, we're like the sun, and then around us, we have the clouds. And the clouds are our unconsciousness. And the light of our being is changing our unconsciousness. It's getting changed from within and from without through our interaction in the world. So, yeah, if you do a terrible, despicable thing, there is a right shame. You know, there is when you feel like deep shame for your actions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's like you spiritual bypass it and just go, oh, well, it was just my unconscious, you know. You can't do that. Well, you can, but it doesn't really, you don't get the most out of it. Whereas when you can kind of go, yeah, that was terrible. My behavior was appalling. When you can kind of see that that's the weather patterns, then it's much easier to apologize. It's much easier to admit you were wrong. It's much easier to go, yeah, that was very bad behavior on my part, and I'm very sorry. What can I do to help or fix or repair? Some things you can't repair. Some things you just got to live with for the rest of your life. But you know, at least if if it's to do with another person, and usually it is, then we can, you know, do our best to make amends to that person. It's not always easy. It's not always possible, but you can at least aim for it. The thing is, when you can see the separation between you and your unconscious, then you're not so attached to it. Your personality's not tied up with it. It's like you're not, you know, oh, I am the terrible person. No, I couldn't be the terrible person. They must be wrong, you know? When you kind of go, yeah, we've all got unconsciousness, when you can have a bit of like a sort of sense of humor about it, which I know is terrible, because if you've been an absolute shit to somebody, or if you've like been cruel or manipulative, and you didn't realize it, of course, because it's your unconscious, but then suddenly you can see, oh my God, I've just seen, oh no, look what I did, you know? If you can kind of go, God, we're so funny, like we're funny little creatures in this big little illusion that we're so involved in. We take it very seriously, and we take ourselves so seriously, particularly with our unconsciousness. We can't laugh about it. We can't, you know, I'm not saying sort of, oh, I just totally betrayed you. It's hilarious. I totally stole all your money. I don't mean that. But I mean to yourself. I mean to yourself on the inside, that you kind of don't like feel that pain. Feel the right shame. That's true. I mean, there's shame that we're indoctrinated with. That's not right shame. That's to be removed for sure. But then there's when you see the effects of your unconsciousness, there is a natural kind of sadness, you know. I love this person, and I just took their head off because they what? Because they looked at me funny? Because they didn't buy me a birthday present? Because they, had the TV on too loud or whatever? I just took their head off for that. That's ridiculous. That is so ridiculous because I love this person, and yet look what I just did. And to not kind of go, oh, I'm so terrible, which just feeds into your shame. It's to kind of go, well, I know who I am, and I know I've got unconsciousness. I am so sorry I took your head off. What can I do to make amends to, I'm saying I'm sorry, so let's start with that. And then what can I do? And then to kind of go, silly old me, like silly old me and my unconsciousness, not to the person, to yourself. Like, well, that's just my unconsciousness. I mean, the horrible, sick feeling of the shame, it will last for a while. Usually lasts for a couple of days, depending on how bad it was. But if you can be kind to yourself on the inside, if you can have that kind of sweet, humorous, like an affectionate, like if you have kids or if you know kids and they behave badly, it's not like you hold it against them for the rest of their lives. Well, we hold our own stuff against us for the rest of our lives. We're that crazy, we're that ridiculous. So that's what the other bit about is that the Buddha in me, which is like the planet, the center, the being, whatever you want to call it, the mystery as it expresses itself in you, it's unmoved by your unconsciousness. It doesn't kind of go, oh, I'm a terrible mystery, I'm a terrible whatever. It's unmoved by that completely. It's just doing its thing. And so it just smiles on and waits for the clouds to part. And it's not even waiting. That's why I said waits without waiting. It really doesn't care. It's unmoved. That's probably a better way of putting it. It does care deeply, but without needing anything from us. It's not like it needs us to get more conscious. It doesn't. That's just its nature. So if we can have a bit of a sense of humor, if we can kind of go, yeah, Namaste, it's beautiful, the Buddha in me sees the Buddha in you, but also know that your pain is going to trigger my pain unless I can kind of do something about it, unless I can kind of go, yeah, when you're angry, I could get angry, I fucking want to get angry, but I'm not going to get angry. I'm going to just know that it's not the true representation of myself. I'm going to try and get ahead of it. And if I do get angry, and if I do take your head off, as soon as the clouds part, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try and make amends for it. I'm going to return. And I'm going to let myself off the hook on the inside about it, or I'm going to forgive myself on the inside, or I'm going to be kind to myself on the inside in the same way I would be to a child or a pet or something that I loved, that I, yeah, you behave badly, but, okay, let's move on kind of thing. Can we do that with ourselves? If we can do that with ourselves, it's so much softer on the inside. The next one is a quote from John Steinbeck. He was the guy who wrote The Grapes of Wrath, among other great books. I haven't read it, but from what I've read about it, it's pretty amazing. I think I saw the movie years ago. Anyway, he says, and now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. Which is, really brings up this whole thing of like, people really get into this whole thing about being perfect. And I think it's very troublesome because you can get it caught up in like trying to be perfect. And then kind of, people go, oh, perfection is, who was it? I think it was Salvador Dali. It was one of his quotes is like, don't worry about perfection. You'll never get there. And then there was some other bit to it as well. Anyway, and then there are other people who are like, well, we're all flawed beings. We're all flawed. And they sort of, that's their thing. They arrive at, we're all flawed. And then there's other people who are like arrive at they're all perfect. And then some people get megalomaniac about it and egotistical about it and like, I'm perfect, everything you do is right. And the thing is like, from as far as I can see, we're both. Like at our core, we are perfect for sure. At the center of us, we're all perfect. But then we all have unconsciousness. And our unconsciousness, you could say, makes us flawed. But we're not flawed in our inner nature, who we are like the essence of who we are. But we've got work to do here, meaning we've got all this unconsciousness to refine. And if you conflate those two things, then you get a mess. You get a messy, like confusing, I'm flawed, but then I'm not, but then I am. Whereas when you can see the two things clearly and you can see this is my unconsciousness, this is what I'm working through, like everybody is, and everybody's got it, and everybody's working through stuff, then you can kind of see the separation. So you're not so attached to your unconsciousness as well. It's not all part of one big mess. It's like, well, that's my unconsciousness, and if it, I do things, hurt people or whatever, then it's much easier for me to make amends and apologize and to laugh at myself and the ridiculousness of unconsciousness and processing it. But if the two are on top of each other, it's very hard to do that. So this thing is helpful, because it's like now that you're no longer perfect, meaning you're not trying to be, you're not trying to deny your unconsciousness, because that's kind of what the idea of being perfect is it's a denial of, well, I've got unconsciousness. Because if you fully go into that, then it will bite you, because you won't be aware of it. Whereas if you're kind of, and when he's saying like now that you're no longer, you no longer have to be perfect, you can be good. Like that's sort of speaking to your own fundamental goodness, which your unconsciousness would make you suffer a bit by projecting this idea of perfection. Like there's this ideal version of you, which it kind of knows, in your heart that there is a purity to you, but it kind of goes, yeah, so that means you should never make a mistake, you should never be cruel, never say the wrong thing, never hurt anybody, never do any of that stuff, which of course we all do. We all have our unconsciousness. And part of the unconsciousness is twisting this kind of self-reflection into this ideal of perfection, which will crucify you. You'll just never be who you are all the time, because for as long as you're alive, you're still processing your unconsciousness. So I think once you can see those two things, and you can kind of let go of the idea of perfection and the idea of just being good, it's sort of easier, isn't it? It's a bit like, oh yeah, I can be good, I can accept the good, it's okay, everything is all right. Like often the big extremes of emotion, like the perfection, the exquisite excellence of love and beauty, they're big things, where it's just ordinary stuff like I'm just okay. I think that's a much more profound statement than I'm perfect. I'm just okay. It's okay it's okay for me to be happy. It's okay for me to be loved. It's not like I deserve love or any of that kind of stuff. Or when love comes, like, oh my God, thank you for loving me. It's just like, it's okay for me to be loved. It's okay for me to have all the good things. These are all fine. If it's, and when it's just said in a very ordinary way, I think it's much more powerful, So it's a lovely quote. Good old John Steinbeck. Now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. The next one says, set a goal so big that you can't achieve it until you grow into the person who can. And that's by Dokoshi no Michi. Probably slaughtered that name, sorry. But it's a very interesting idea. And it sort of encapsulates really what part of manifestation is about. Because we kind of just go, oh, I want the thing. I want the $1 million. I want the new car. I want the job. I want all the different things. But if you think about the cliche of the person who wins the lottery and then 3 years later they're more broke than they were before they won, and they can't hold the money. And that's a lot to do with because they couldn't hold a frequency. They couldn't hold the frequency of the money. Now I know that sounds a bit like woo-woo, but it's like they couldn't be the person who was that wealthy. It freaked them out. So they gave it away. They made bad investments. They couldn't see themselves as that person, because a lot of becoming the person you want to be is is slowly changing your self-image of who you see yourself as being. And that's not easy. That's why this is good, because it's like, set a goal that's so big for yourself, or I don't know about goal is the right word, but like an intention. I am going to have this thing, do this thing, be this person, start this thing, whatever it is. Set something that's so big that you have to change. Like, you have to grow into becoming that person. That if you don't grow into becoming that person, it's not going to happen. So you have to sort of change your frequency to be able to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to kind of get very specific about it. Like, write down, write down who you will be to achieve this thing that you want to do, or to become this thing that you want to do. So let's say you want to start a very successful company. So you would have to write down, you don't have to, but you could write down all the different things about what kind of person you will be in order to have the big company. Let's say you want to start a big charity. So you'd write down what kind of person, who will I be if I am able to do that. Let's say you want to be a fantastic therapist or healer type person. It's the same again. What kind of person would I be? Because you're not already that. So it's not enough to just write down, oh, I want to be this thing. To be that thing and to hold the frequency of the thing, you have to become the person who can hold it. And because it hasn't happened, chances are you're not that person yet. Same with relationships. What kind of relationship? I want to have this kind of lovely relationship. Well, what kind of person would I be to be able to have that kind of thing? I want to have a big circle of friends. What kind of person would I have to be in order to be able to have that? So it's a very powerful little way of looking at things. What kind of person will I have to be to get this thing that I want, or to become this thing that I want? And so if you set it, I mean, there's a few different ways. I mean, of course, baby steps are important, but then you can start to work towards that person. So let's say you kind of go, well, that person would be very confident. That version of me would be very confident. And they'd be very in control of money, for example, or very confident with money. So if you're not particularly confident with money, then you would, I'm going to have to grow into that. But you can start that now, because you can think about the future version of yourself that you're intending to grow into, and you go, how would they behave? I've just got my gas bill. How would that version of me relate to this? And then you can start relating to it that way. And it's all internal. It's not like you start spending like you've got loads of money. I don't mean that. But it's like you start changing the way you think about things to the way you would think about things when you become that person. So you almost become that person now. Because money, for example, is something that is mostly in our minds, Like, you know how much money you have in the bank. But you're not sitting in front of it all the time, looking at it, going, look at all the money I have. It's in your head, okay? Or it's whenever you look at your, on your phone or wherever it is, you check your balance or whatever. But most of the time it's not present. So most of the time you're just carrying this energetic version of yourself on the inside. So if you feel like you have no money and you're poor or you're broke or whatever way you describe it, and you want to have money, then you can start feeling like that most of the time now. And the only times that you won't feel like that is when you are checking your bank balance. But you'd be surprised, the more you change how you feel on the inside and more you kind of try on this future version of yourself, surprisingly, you start to become it. You start to take these baby steps towards it. When you ask yourself, how would that future version of me relate to this situation that I'm in now? It doesn't really matter what it is to do. Money is handy because it's quantifiable, but whether it's relationships, whether it's building an organization, whether it's becoming super fit, whether it's whatever it is, it's pretty much a neutral field. We think we have to earn all this stuff and we have to get permission and we have to deserve things. We don't. It's all just reflective of what's going on inside us. When you know that, then you can start to change what's going on inside you right now, and that has a big effect. The next one is by Lorno, and it says, life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living, heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. I think that's brilliant. And it's a great example of what life is really like. And this river that's blasting away behind me is like an example of, like, now it's in a dramatic phase. Now it's like coming out like a full throttle. Even like to walk to where I'm standing now, half it is kind of under the river at the moment, whereas normally this is a very peaceful, quiet, idyllic kind of spot, you know. And it's a good example of what this person is saying in this meme of life is like, it's full of mostly ordinary stuff, mostly not dramatic stuff. And if you kind of think your life is a bit boring because there's no drama happening, you'll miss the amazingness of what's happening around you. Because when you get into the ordinariness and you can begin to see what's really going on in the ordinary moments of your life, the ordinary becomes more and more, and it becomes extraordinary. And you realize that everything is kind of extraordinary. And it's kind of similar to this thing of like letting what comes come and letting what stay, and letting what goes go. It's like, it's all happening anyway. It's all powerful, blasting through. And we sort of think we're in charge. And to a degree, we do have a big influence on how our life is and what it means to us. But there's also this mysterious element, the mystery that I talk about a lot, that is doing its thing. Like this river is doing its thing right now. It's just blasting along. So it's kind of the same. It comes through our life with the same kind of powerful blasting energy. And then it goes very quiet. And then it goes very dry. Like this river can get very dry. Just the same way life can get very dry, or you can go through difficult times in your life. And all are okay, and all are breathtakingly beautiful when you can accept this broad sweep that life makes through our lives. And most of our unhappiness just comes from resisting it, or from having ideas about it, or using force. You know, like this difference between force and power. Like this river is very powerful. You couldn't say it's very forceful. I wouldn't anyway. But if I got in there and I was like, I'm going to try and walk across this river, you know, that would be me trying to be a bit forceful. And the power of the river would overcome my force pretty quickly. And I would end up probably in the sea at the rate that this river is so in flood. So it's a lovely reminder. This meme is a lovely reminder of the different, you know, seasons that a day can go through, that a life can go through, and to not overlook the beautiful ordinary moments. They're just as important. They're not as dramatic, they don't get your attention, but they make up the majority of our life. So if we resist them, then we're kind of resisting our life, which is a shame because it's all beautiful. It's just different aspects of the same thing. That's all I have for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.